I was given one piece of equipment, and that was a large commercial copier. I didn't know what I was going to use this for, but I set it in the building, and then it dawned on me. We took reams of paper and began making calendars, blank calendars by the hundreds. And from one end of that empty theater, which had no seats in it, to the other end, row after row, I made columns of calendars going back in antiquity over 2,000 years. And then I got on the phone with Robert Scott Wadsworth, who is a biblical astronomer, and we began hammering out dates in the past using an astronomy program that was not available until just recently. And so we did our calculations for the percentage of illumination above the city of Jerusalem and the degree of above the horizon. We did this so we could figure out these ancient years, these ancient calendars, and to figure out in the Gospels where Yeshua was at these different points in time, because we knew where he was according to the feasts. And so as we put together these things, at the end of it, what we produced was the first astronomically corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. Now, when I arrived in Jerusalem, I arrived a little bit late. I tried to get here for the Day of Trumpets, for the new moon of Tishri 1. But as I was flying into Israel, I saw the first sliver of the new moon appear, and when I landed in Israel, I went down to the wall to pray. And as I was praying, I asked that the Almighty would show me the people in the land of Israel to whom I would need to get connected in order to make sure that our calculations were correct and to make sure that we were online for determining the beginning of the seventh or Sabbath millennium. Well, I left the wall and went down to visit for some friends of mine. Mika Harari, he and his wife had a harp shop in downtown Jerusalem, Harari's Harps. They were the first ones to make biblical harps since this land became desolate 2,000 years ago. And as I went in to his shop, he was there early in the morning, and we began speaking. And I told him that as I flew in, I saw the first sliver of the new moon, and I was talking about the biblical calendar to him. And as we were talking about this issue, he looked through the glass doors, seeing a gentleman walk up to the harp shop, and he said, "This is incredible. You have got to meet this guy. You are on the same page as this guy." The door opens, and a tall, lanky Jewish gentleman walks in, paying no attention to me, looking right into Mika Harari's eyes, and said, "You could not see the new moon on Friday night, you couldn't see it on Saturday night, you could not see the new moon until last night. We missed Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Trumpets, by both days this year. We missed the feast by both days." Mika said, "What difference does it make? What difference does it make? We just go by the Pharisee calendar anyway. What difference does it make?" And I turned to this gentleman, I said, "Was the new moon 1.5% illuminated, 13 degrees above the horizon, 17 minutes after sunset?" His jaw dropped, his eyes opened up, and at that moment, he knew that I knew that it makes all the difference in the world, because we were talking about the Creator's original reckoning of time. As we began to discuss things, I found that for the last 8 years that he had been keeping careful records of the sighting of the new moon from Israel. In fact, he built the roof of his house as an observatory to sight the new moon from Tekoa, where Amos was a sheep herder in the days of ancient Israel. It is from there that each month he would sight the new moon, and he would be on the telephone with sometimes hundreds of people around the land of Israel who were also inspired to restore the ancient biblical reckoning of time. These were all Orthodox Jews, all Pharisees. But yet they knew that when they entered back into the land, there would be a point in time that we would go back to the Creator's reckoning of time. Well, that began a very exciting time with Bruce Brill and our beginning to work on the calendar together. It was at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, after working with Bruce Brill and having published an article in the newspaper here in Jerusalem concerning the astronomically corrected biblical Hebrew calendar, that Bruce Brill gave me a call and said that I had been invited to attend the annual meeting of the Israeli New Moon Society. And why I was invited is because my calendar, the astronomically corrected biblical Hebrew calendar, had been making its circuit in Israel for over a year at that point, and it had gotten into the hands of some rabbinical scholars, and they knew that our calculations were dead on. They were very excited about it, and so Bruce Brill and I went to this particular meeting. Now, the meeting discussing biblical topics in Israel, it's all going to be in Hebrew. And so Bruce was my interpreter. And at the beginning of the meeting, he began interpreting everything, and then he said, I'm just going to interpret what you don't know. And so he sat there sometimes for 45 minutes, sometimes it was an hour, and he said nothing because most of this stuff was familiar to me. But it came time for the keynote speaker. And as the keynote speaker took the dais and was arranging his notes up on the table, Bruce went up to him and told him that I was there. And he looked back at me, he nodded, and the two of them left the dais and came back, and he began to speak to me. And he said that he had studied my calendar, and he said that you are beginning the year on this corrected calendar in the month of Tishri. The month of Tishri, being Rosh Hashanah, is a rabbinic tradition. It's a tradition that I've grown up with, and of course you're familiar with, but it is a tradition. That is not the original biblical calendar. Now, I have to admit that many times in my studies and my thinking, I default to rabbinic teaching just because that is where most of the information has come from. When people look at modern Judaism, they look at the teachings of the rabbis and they see that rabbis, being a sect of the Pharisees, that's actually one contingency of the Jewish people. It's not all of their scholarship by any means. And as he told me that there is something that I need to do to make the final corrections so that the calendar is absolutely accurate, and then on the corner of a sheet of a paper, he wrote down a name and a phone number. He wrote it very small, he tore it off and put it under the end of his thumb, and as he stood there, he said, you need to give this person a call as quickly as possible. Now, don't let anyone in this room see the name that's on this paper, or it will get both of us thrown out of here. Do you understand? I said, I understand. Now, I didn't understand why we get both of us thrown out of here, but I understood I didn't want to get thrown out, and this was to be a secret. So he removed his thumb. I put my thumb over it, rolled it to the edge of the table, curled it up in a ball, slipped it in my pocket, and the next morning, we were sitting at a cafe in downtown Jerusalem with a gentleman named Nehemia Gordon.
All of your life, you've gone to church and studied the Bible, but you've never learned about the Hebraic roots of your faith. You want a more meaningful relationship with God. You want the ability to truly understand His Word. We believe the message on this DVD is so life-changing that it will change your perspective of God and His Word that we are willing to send it to you for only a donation of shipping and handling.
Our lives have just been more fulfilled. The Bible makes so much more sense now. We can read it, we can understand it from a Jewish, a Hebraic perspective, because we really wanted to serve God the way that He intended to be served.
For the suggested donation of $6.95 for shipping and handling, you will receive this life-changing DVD. Order today by phone or online and prepare yourself for a rude awakening.